Um, yeah, I think stuff to do with family overwhelms me quite a bit. You know, worry or stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit. But in terms of, you know, doing the job and things like that, I don't feel too overwhelmed by that. Not now, anyway.
Shockwaves ripple through the British royal family as Prince William is reported to have taken the unprecedented step of stripping Princess Beatrice of all her military affiliations, official representative roles, and the right to use royal titles in any formal capacity. The dramatic move is said to stem from what began as a routine financial review of royal accounts. Auditors, digging deeper, allegedly uncovered a series of suspicious transactions spanning months, with millions of pounds quietly moving out of royal funds through complex layered transfers. At the center of many of these transactions, sources claim, was Princess Beatrice. Internal allegations suggest the princess secretly channeled money from royal coffers to cover legal expenses tied to defending her father, the disgraced former Prince Andrew, amid his ongoing business and reputational troubles. When the details reached Prince William, insiders say the heir to the throne immediately launched a highly confidential investigation, meticulously tracing emails and connections in what palace observers have described as Buckingham Palace's coldest and most ruthless internal purge in recent memory. The question now gripping royal watchers is just how far Princess Beatrice may have gone in this months-long shadow operation, and whether William's decisive intervention will expose others in the royal circle entangled in the web of questionable finances. In the solemn hush of Buckingham Palace, where every footfall on the thick carpets carried the weight of centuries, the Royal Finance Office operated like a perfectly calibrated metronome. Nominally overseen at the highest level by Prince William, it now reflected a future monarch forged in resolve. No longer the shy young prince with the hesitant smile, William had been tempered by seismic family fractures. From Princess Diana's departure to Prince Harry's noisy secession in 2020. Those upheavals had instilled in him an almost ruthless instinct to safeguard the monarchy's reputation. In the modern age, he knew, the institution's survival rested not on absolute power, but on transparency and public trust. That morning, an unfamiliar tension hung over the prince's study. The desk held no engraved invitations or itineraries for overseas tours. Only a thick dossier bound in deep green, sealed with the stamp of the internal audit team. It had begun innocently enough. A mid-level accountant reviewing routine maintenance expenses for lesser priority residences at the close of Q3 2025 paused at a single figure, £15,000 allocated for infrastructure technical consultancy in a Windsor precinct. The amount was modest against the vast royal budget, yet it lacked a corresponding reference code. Professional curiosity pulled the team deeper into the labyrinth of ledgers. Layer by layer, the veil lifted, revealing not a clerical error, but a hairline fracture in a massive dam. Dozens, then hundreds of similar disbursements, each sliced below mandatory reporting thresholds, had quietly drained from the central fund over the past 18 months. The totals escalated from tens of thousands to millions of pounds. On page 12 of the intermediary files, one name surfaced repeatedly in the buried annotations: Princess Beatrice. The elder daughter of Andrew and Sarah Ferguson occupied a tangled place in the family hierarchy. After her father's military titles and official duties were stripped in 2022 amid global legal scandals, Beatrice had labored to craft an image of independence and propriety. Her marriage to Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi, a wealthy property developer, seemed to distance her from the spotlight's glare. Yet the cold ink on white paper told a different story of loyalty. William rose slowly and crossed to the tall window overlooking the palace courtyard. He recalled Beatrice's recent appearances at low-key family gatherings. Her expression shadowed with unease, sometimes edged with urgency when she stood near palace finance officials. At the time, he had dismissed it as strain from her father's protracted legal battles. A profound disappointment welled within the prince. He understood that if this leaked, it would strike a mortal blow to the reform agenda he and his father, the king, were pursuing. The betrayal cut deeper than mere stewardship of national assets. It wounded him as elder brother, as head of the succeeding generation. The throne's security permitted no individual, not even one of direct royal blood, to treat public funds as personal indemnity for private mistakes. He turned, took up his fountain pen, and signed the authorization for a special, strictly confidential, unrestricted review of every account linked to Beatrice and her support office. This was no longer a matter that could be smoothed over with afternoon tea. This demanded a purge. "Forward the entire file to my Judicial Investigation Office," William ordered, his voice ringing clear in the empty room. "And ensure no one in finance leaves their post until I have the complete list of accomplices. Either this is a grave systemic failure," he murmured, almost to himself, "or a far larger secret Beatrice has guarded for too long, and I will be the one to write its ending." The deeper Prince William delved into the financial labyrinth, the clearer it became that Beatrice's infiltration was no impulsive act. It was the culmination of years of painstakingly cultivated trust and subtle manipulation. Though stripped of any formal role in royal engagements, she retained an unofficial yet potent influence through deeply personal connections within the finance office. She issued no commands backed by authority. Instead, Beatrice wielded empathy and small, thoughtful gestures to win loyalty. Investigation files revealed that over the past 2 years, she had regularly sent personal gifts and handwritten notes of encouragement to the families of senior document verification staff. For long-serving employees who felt ground down by pressure and overshadowed in the vast machinery, attention from a princess of direct royal blood was an almost irresistible privilege. This psychological bond formed an invisible firewall around her. Staff began to view the regularization of her requests not as rule-breaking, but as an act of safeguarding family interests. In the minimalist study at Kensington Palace, William sat turning page after page of photocopied transfer orders that had been approved at astonishing speed. Ordinarily, any external expenditure exceeding £50,000 requires at least 3 layers of approval and a minimum of 7 working days before disbursement. Under Beatrice's quiet intervention, however, these sums cleared in under 6 hours. Her cunning lay in fragmentation. Rather than trigger red flags with a single large withdrawal, she splintered the flows into hundreds of modest transactions disguised as routine maintenance for obscure, historic sites or dormant charitable funds whose bank codes had never been formally closed. Each payment was a disconnected fragment. Only when reassembled in the full diagram did they reveal the shape of a financial monster quietly devouring public money. Fear saturated the finance offices during the closed-door interrogations. Some of the younger analysts, confronted with the piercing gaze of William's hand-picked special investigation team, could not hide their trembling. They admitted receiving late-night calls directly from Beatrice. Soft-spoken words, laced with veiled references to career futures and absolute loyalty to the Windsor bloodline. The manipulation was chilling in its effectiveness. Those carrying out her wishes felt they were performing a noble service to rescue Prince Andrew's honor rather than abetting financial crime. The decisive breakthrough came from a veteran data analyst, renowned for near-obsessive precision. He noticed an odd commonality in the final destination addresses of the transfer chains. Every trail led through intermediary servers in the Caribbean, yet the ultimate endpoint was a cluster of legal funds quietly paying out confidential settlement agreements for Andrew in the United States. William stared at the money flow map, sensing the cold calculation that lay beneath his cousin's gentle demeanor. Beatrice was not merely trying to save her father, she was constructing a parallel financial fortress, independent of the Crown's oversight. She had exploited the chaos and legal vulnerabilities created by her father's lawsuits to carve out a black hole that swallowed funds no one dared probe for fear of exposing family secrets. Her actions amounted to more than financial betrayal. They constituted a direct assault on the trust William had labored to rebuild. In the shadowed corridors of the palace, Beatrice's network of influence continued to operate like roots creeping beneath the foundations of the monarchy, waiting for the moment to strangle transparency. William understood that to uproot this network, he would need more than financial evidence. He would have to shatter the blind faith of everyone she had quietly enlisted. Alone before the portrait of the late Queen, William gripped the dossier tightly. He realized the scale of the affair had far outgrown his initial suspicions. This was no longer a routine internal inquiry. It was a battle to reclaim the integrity of the royal house from an adversary who knew every hidden passage of this ancient home better than anyone. The investigation entered its most brutal phase when Prince William resolved to widen the scope to affiliated business entities. In the command room at Kensington Palace, the money flow maps began to intertwine like a dense spider's web. William spent hours studying the migration of figures, sensing the extraordinary sophistication with which Beatrice had concealed her tracks. She was no longer merely a blindly devoted daughter. She had transformed herself into a coldly efficient financial orchestrator. The bulk of the diverted funds had been confirmed as payments toward Prince Andrew's legal settlements. Invoices from top-tier law firms in New York and London were settled under vague descriptors such as Royal Strategic Advisory Expenses. Beatrice had deftly exploited the deference junior staff felt toward her father's name, pressuring them to approve opaque documents. The prevailing psychology among those employees was a deep reluctance to question anything that might touch on matters of national sensitivity. They convinced themselves that probing further would be an affront to royal honor. Yet when William's legal advisors dug into the tax filings of companies owned by Eduardo, Beatrice's husband, a darker truth began to surface. A substantial portion of the money, rather than flowing into legal funds to salvage her father's reputation, had been diverted into faltering real estate ventures. These sums were disguised with remarkable finesse as international strategic investments and special overseas diplomatic expenses intended to bolster the royal image abroad. A slow-burning fury rose in William's chest as he examined crudely altered yet brazenly defiant documents. Certain critical financial reports had been delayed by weeks or replaced with forged electronic signatures. Beatrice had constructed an internal shield within the finance office, loyalists who erased traces or muddied data whenever routine audits approached. The betrayal had outgrown familial ties. It had become systematic abuse of power for personal gain. William's gaze settled on a colossal advance loan earmarked for an urban development project in southern Italy, precisely where Edoardo was facing severe liquidity problems. Labeled as cultural sponsorship, the facility was, in reality, plugging gaping debt holes that threatened to collapse his family's business empire. Beatrice had gambled everything, staking the prestige of the dynasty and public funds to salvage her husband's career, banking on an economic rebound that would allow her to quietly repay the sums before discovery. The escalation in Beatrice's actions betrayed a mind teetering on the edge of desperation. She glided through public events with an eerily composed exterior, yet behind the facade lay sleepless nights orchestrating intricate money trails. William could picture her hunched over a screen, fingers flying across the keyboard to sever the final threads linking the central fund to private accounts. He stood before the completed money flow diagram assembled by financial intelligence experts. The connecting threads were no longer conjectures. They were direct slashes. Turning to his closest advisor, his face as impassive as carved quartz, William let the silence in the room carry the weight of a verdict. He understood that he was no longer dealing with mere oversight or a momentary lapse. Under the dim amber light of the late-night office, William recognized that he was staring at the skeleton of a shadow financial empire where greed and pride had triumphed over loyalty. He rested a hand lightly on the thick dossier, where Beatrice's name now stood, indelibly linked to the fracture of ironclad trust. The game of concealment was over. Only time separated the entire apparatus from exposure beneath the unsparing light of royal justice. The atmosphere in the Royal Finance Office had thickened into palpable suspicion these past days. Eyes darted away, murmurs died the instant the audit team's footsteps echoed down the corridor. Caught at the eye of the storm was Julian, a senior budget coordinator with 15 years of service, who felt the ground cracking beneath his feet. He was the living link who had personally authorized wave after wave of transfer orders disguised as overseas expenses, but which in truth fed the legal funds of Prince Andrew and the real estate ventures of Beatrice's husband. The psychological torment began in windowless interrogation rooms at Kensington Palace. Julian sat facing Prince William's investigation team, sweat soaking the stiff collar of his shirt. He remembered those late afternoons when Princess Beatrice herself appeared at the office, carrying the false warmth of intimacy and promises of a secure place in the new reign. She had poured into his ear arguments about sacrifice for the greater good, about shielding royal flesh and blood from the onslaught of international media. Under the weight of deference and a vague dread of the dynasty's power, Julian had yielded. At first, his actions were merely a quiet bypassing of dual control protocols. He had deliberately accelerated procedures by slipping Beatrice's payment requests into stacks of urgent national files, rendering them invisible to overburdened superiors. But as the sums climbed into the millions, remorse began to gnaw at him. Every time he saw Prince William on television speaking of transparency, Julian felt like a traitor betraying the very professional ideals he once held sacred. The complete psychological collapse of this witness came when the investigators presented evidence that some of the funds he had approved had leaked into personal accounts unrelated to any noble effort to salvage royal honor. Julian realized he was not the silent hero protecting the monarchy that Beatrice had painted him to be. He was merely a pawn in her game of self-enrichment. Fear for his wife and children's future, for the reputation of an exemplary civil service family, finally overpowered his blind loyalty to the princess. In the depths of despair, Julian made an irreversible choice. He secretly gathered and backed up every electronic conversation, every veiled instruction sent through encrypted messaging apps that Beatrice had confidently believed were erased. He reconstructed timelines, cross-referencing transfer orders, with clandestine meetings in out-of-the-way London cafes, places where Beatrice had handed him forged documents to legitimize the money flows. William received the dossier from the investigation team in chilling silence. He read line after line of emails in which Beatrice employed sophisticated codes to direct this employee. Julian's detailed testimony sealed the final gaps in the picture of guilt. The prince looked at the trembling witness before him and saw not a betrayer, but a victim of consummate power manipulation. Julian's cooperation struck like a hammer against the flawless shell Beatrice had so carefully constructed. Transfer records, internal emails, and exhaustive statements now rested firmly in William's hands, forming an irrefutable indictment. The truth was no longer lifeless figures on a computer screen. It had become a narrative of betrayal, greed, and the shattering of unshakable trust. William closed the heavy dossier with a dry snap of leather against wood, the sound sharp as a starting pistol for the final confrontation. He rose and gazed out toward the gray horizon of London, where a major storm was gathering. Every piece was now on the table. The witness from the shadows had lit the fuse, and the time had come for the prince to carry it into the chamber of reckoning, where Beatrice waited with the last remnants of confidence belonging to someone who still believed herself untouchable. The sealed meeting room in Buckingham Palace that day carried the atmosphere of an ancient court-martial, stifling, solemn, and merciless. Pale golden light from antique crystal chandeliers spilt across the long oak table, where Prince William sat facing his cousin. Princess Beatrice entered with impeccable poise. Her confidence was not feigned. It rested on the unshakable belief that every digital trace had been erased and that her loyalists would remain silent to their last breath. William studied Beatrice with a penetrating gaze. No overt anger marred his features, only the cold impartiality of a judge holding the fate of a dynasty in his hands. He opened the confrontation by gently sliding the initial batch of financial reports toward her. Beatrice glanced at them briefly, a faint, dismissive smile touching her lips. She spoke slowly of clerical oversights by junior staff, of the complexities involved in managing charitable funds during volatile economic times, and she did not fail to mention, subtly, her own devotion to preserving the image of a father besieged by legal troubles. Every gesture, from the way she clasped her hands on the table to the slight tilt of her head as she listened, projected the air of a misunderstood victim. Yet the first cracks appeared in Beatrice's composure when William methodically produced printouts of internal emails from anonymous accounts she had believed untraceable. Her eyes froze on the lines containing their private cipher, the one shared only with Julian. Her fingertips pressed together until the knuckles blanched white beneath the lamplight. She still attempted to counter, insisting the exchanges had been selectively quoted or stripped of context. Her stubborn denials thickened the air until the only sound was the relentless tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. The turning point arrived when William instructed his aide to play an audio file and present Julian's sworn statement. The living witness Beatrice had been certain remained under her control. As Julian's voice, trembling yet clear, filled the room, recounting every clandestine meeting, every envelope of forged documents, every promise laced with the weight of royal authority, Beatrice's expression underwent a horrifying transformation. The blood slowly drained from her face, leaving it waxen and ashen. The feigned innocence vanished from her eyes, replaced by raw, bottomless panic, the look of someone who has just felt the ground give way beneath her. Every link in the intricate money transfer chain is now locked perfectly into place under the weight of irrefutable evidence. From the flows directed to American law firms to the economic lifelines extended to her husband's ventures in Italy. Beatrice stared at the thick dossier before her, breath coming in short, ragged bursts. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but her throat seemed to close around the words. Silence descended on the room, heavy as 1,000 stones. No apology emerged, no justification carried enough force to shore up a deception that had been torn out by the roots. William needed no further words. He rose, gathered the files, and let his gaze pass over Beatrice one final time, a look that held profound disappointment and unyielding resolve in equal measure. Beatrice remained seated, motionless as a wax figure amid the ruins of the confidence she had once possessed. She understood that the moment this door closed would mark the official end of her privileged royal life. The aftershocks from the confrontation at Buckingham Palace rippled through the corridors of power like a high-voltage current, leaving behind an eerie, bone-chilling silence. Prince William, with the resolve of a guardian of legacy, permitted no delay. Internal sanctions were issued immediately, marking the official collapse of Princess Beatrice within the monarchy. She was no longer a representative of the king, no longer a source of family pride. Now she was merely a name forever linked to unforgivable financial misconduct. Beatrice received the verdict in emotional paralysis. Every honorary military title she had once worn with pride, every patronage of major and minor charities, and her right to use the title princess in any official capacity, were stripped away without mercy. She stared into the mirror and saw a woman who still carried royal blood, but had lost the soul of a royal family member. The duties that once filled her schedule, from hospital visits to diplomatic galas, now loomed as vast, terrifying voids. The outside world reacted with the merciless speed of the digital age. Charities, corporations that had once boasted her name on their boards, and her husband's business partners issued terse, icy press statements within hours. They severed all ties, scrubbed her image from official websites as though erasing a stain to safeguard their own vital reputations. This isolation went beyond the legal. It was a total social boycott, reducing Beatrice to a ghost in the very upper echelons she had once inhabited. At Kensington Palace, a quiet yet profoundly symbolic transition began. William sat with the Princess of Wales, the Duchess of Edinburgh, and Lady Louise Windsor to redistribute the wreckage Beatrice had left behind. The critical responsibilities and cherished patronages she had once held were reassigned to women of unwavering loyalty. Catherine took on the children's education initiatives with her characteristic calm and compassion. Sophie assumed the delicate diplomatic portfolios. And Lady Louise, the promising next generation, stepped into the light to shoulder her first representational roles. This handover was more than a personnel reshuffle. It was a resounding message to the public. The House of Windsor would purge itself to survive. The fractures Beatrice had caused were being mended through the dedication of those who remained. William watched the changes with a mixture of relief and quiet melancholy. He knew he had done what was necessary for the crown, yet the price was the permanent rupture of a family. Beatrice retreated to her private residence, far from the besieging lenses of the press pack outside. She stood at the window, gazing at the stack of farewell letters from former partners piled on the table, understanding that she had lost everything in one reckless gamble to salvage the mistakes of the past. No more reverent greetings, no more royal privileges, only the darkness of regret and the exorbitant cost of greed. Prince William stood on the palace balcony looking down at the crowd of tourists gathered below. A more transparent era had begun, but it had been forged through the most painful decisions. The monarchy had prevailed in its battle to protect its integrity, yet in the shadowed corners of sealed rooms, the scars of Beatrice's betrayal would endure as a harsh reminder of both the strength and the fragility of royal power. After reading this story, in your opinion, should Princess Beatrice's actions be viewed as a blind sacrifice out of familial love for her father and husband, or simply as a moral degeneration in exploiting public funds for personal gain? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.